Alright, so we're going to take a look at eyes. I'm not going to go too in depth right now. I know so far we've just kind of blocked our eyes in with spheres. And I noticed a few people have kind of taken a stab at doing a more realistic eye with the cornea and everything. I'm going to go over just a sort of simplistic way to do it, and then I'm going to show you a more complicated eye that you could try if you want, but it's not necessary. Yeah, so let's take a look. There's kind of two elements to this. There's making the eye. We're going to model the eye, which I know sounds silly. It just sounds like, it should just be a sphere, but there's actually a little bit more to it than that. But for the most part, it is pretty much just going to be an altered sphere. And then there is working on the lids and the area around the eye. I just kind of want to give you guys sort of a look at ways that we can sort of detail this out a little bit more if we want to. And just so we can kind of set up eyelids instead of just having kind of a hole. I know a lot of people, I think, have been having trouble really getting this to hug the eye well. I mean, even here, you can see I started to do it, but I've got this hole here. And basically, the more edge loops that you put around here, the better off you're going to be, just in terms of getting a better contour. You don't have to go too far, though. So I'm just going to, let's see. I mean, so this is pretty much the box model head. This is not one that I've taken one of the heads a little bit further than this, so I wanted to start with one that was a little bit further back in time. But the main thing, you want to like kind of get the eye in there first, and then figure out how big you want it to be. I should actually open up. I'm going to make a second reference that's just a head, because I think everyone sort of has a tendency to make the eye bigger than it needs to be. And again, this of course comes down to what kind of a character you're doing. If your goal is to do a more anime character, cartoony character, then maybe the eyes will be exaggerated. I know one of the examples I've been using, the Snow Girl character, has slightly bigger eyes than would be normal. So I'm just going to set up another stool lever for this. Actually, I got to change this to eye. And which one was it? Okay, I'll just change this to face. So I'm just mapping this face image that I have already created for other tutorials. I'm going to map that to a plane so we can have that to look at for scale reference of the eye. And just right-clicking on this, going down to assign existing material, and we'll go with the face. So you can see, just at a glance, there's a very big difference. The eyes on the real character are much smaller than the eyes on this character. I'm going to check this real quick just to make this a little bit easier to look at. Alright, so let's first start by just looking at the actual eye. I'm just going to hide this, and I'm going to delete this and start a new one. I'm just going to start with a sphere, and I'm going to drop this down to make it a little bit easier to work with to about 12 should be good. We'll lay down to 10. Really don't need a whole lot of topology for this. It's going to be kind of small inside of the character. So just go to 90, 0, 0. Actually, I'm going to do 12. That's kind of ugly. Yeah, I like 12 a little bit better. Just to kind of get these points and make this symmetrical in both axes. You know what? Let's bring that face back for now. Just so we have a little bit of reference on the scale. Kind of want to center it along here. Already one thing that you can see is this center line should really match up, so I'm just going to make that adjustment while I'm looking at it. It's not going to be perfect every time, but at least for the initial setup, I'd like it to be that way. Come on. Alright. So this is going to be pretty quick. We're just going to take a look at this from the side view. So from the front, the eye really should pretty much just be a sphere. I'm going to soften my normals on this real quick, and then take a look from the side. So the main thing to consider And actually, I'll just get into sort of doing a more detailed look now, because, you know, why not? I'm going to create a cylinder. This is going to be my iris. And then the rest of the eye will serve as the cornea and the lens and everything else. So, let's just hold V to snap it right to the middle here. Drag this out. So eyes are obviously incredibly complicated things, and you could take whole classes on how to model an eye out. But, you know, it doesn't take a whole lot to create at least just a sort of generic looking eye. Just holding tab to drag around all those. Just going to actually drag here, delete, and just start with this cylinder. My front view, and let's snap that here, and actually I'm going to undo all the deletes, and I'm going to make this match up to the exact same amount of subdivisions of this, just make it cleaner for when we want to smooth, or just to prevent it from penetrating through the eye geometry, because this is going to be almost immediately on top. So let's scale it down and try to line it up with this edge loop, and that should be pretty good. We could even work over top of this if we want. We'll just scale it down a little bit to make it work. But let's try to, let's see. Gotta estimate here a little bit. And I'm gonna probably push the scale of my iris up just a little bit more than I should for this, and then we can kind of adjust it after the fact. But yeah, we probably could go a little bit smaller. So now I'm working on the eye. I'm just going to scale this down. Oh, missed one. Scale this down to the size of that iris. Look at it from the right side. And see, I did that on both sides. And I'm actually just going to, I don't need these. We're never going to see that, so I'm deleting that. Select all of these again. Go our side view. And basically what we want to do is have something like this, and then scale this out just a touch. Because the lens of your eye, or the cornea over the iris, pushes, I'm pretty sure that's how it is. I should probably look this up to make sure I'm getting it right. Anatomy of eye. So let's bring this in here. Yeah, so the cornea is on the outside. We have our lens kind of sandwiched between the iris and the cornea. And yeah, so you can kind of see when you look at these, particularly in this one, there really is a bit of a bulge here. So we're not going to have enough edge loops to do that. So, of course, we'll add one here. Kind of, we wanted to sort of have like an even amount of roundness here. So I think we want to kind of bring it out to here. And I'm going to add one more edge loop around here, just so this isn't so pointy. Scale this one out a little bit. And lastly, just kind of bring it out. So there's just this tiny bulge. So again, really subtle. You don't have to do it this way. If you just want to do a sphere in there, that's totally fine. You know, the focus of this project is not necessarily the eye, but I want to give people, you know, a little bit of information on how they can do these sorts of things if they choose to. So, we have our iris here. I'm going to delete this face and these faces. And I'm going to double click on this edge to get the edge loop. Let's bring that forward, scale it up so it's right around the same size. And actually, I want to bring this much closer and do the same thing. And now I'm just going to extrude this one back to kind of get it out of the way. And we're going to extrude this one in. Let's look at our eye again. So you can see if it's a pretty big area. We'll start with the big extrusion down to the pupil, and then just extrude that in. And actually, yeah, that's one other thing. So the iris kind of, it does a lot of things. Actually, I think Zebra Central someone just did a really great eye sculpt. Yeah, let's take a look at this. This will really give us a good idea. Obviously, this example goes way further than we need it to. But this is a fantastic reference. So if you really want to look at some cool eye anatomy, check out ZBrush Central. But you can see how complicated the iris can get in here, and the pupil. So you actually have like the divots down here and up here. We're not going to go that far. We can do some of that with texture anyway. But you can see it's a nice perfect sphere with the lens kind of pushing this piece out, which is what we already did. So I'm going to pull this in a little bit and extrude in. Now I'm just going to cap this element off. My camera's facing, needs to go a little bit. The near clip plane needs to be a little lower so I can zoom in a little bit further. So there are a couple different ways to do this. I'm just going to extrude in, cap this off. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make the material that's on this a matte black, so you can't really see into it. Now just select all these verts, and let's see if I can merge them all. Yes, if I go up a little bit on my distance threshold, it merges every one of them. Hit 3 to make sure, and yeah. So now, we're a little bit jagged. I'm going to turn off my wireframe so I can make sure nothing's penetrating the outer eye, and it is not. So that's good. So let's just kind of bevel these edges out a little bit. Soften them. Again, looking at this, you can see... Oh, things are snapping weird. Okay, so you can see there's a really soft turn in here because these muscles all kind of create this sort of soft gradient around here. So we're going to do that on a much smaller level just by doing a bevel. Let's pull that into maybe about 0.1. Give it 2 segments if we really want to round it out. Maybe make it 0.125, go up a little bit. And let's just do the same thing here. Do this one up even more. We can kind of do this manually if we want. So, flip forward. So it's tough. You kind of want to get it really close to the edge here. We can actually push it forward and scale it up just a tiny bit, and just make sure. Part of the advantage of working with everything perfectly aligned like this, having both of our pieces having the same amount of radial edge loops, is that all we need to really do to make sure that there's no penetration is look at this one example. So as long as it's not going through that, it shouldn't be going through anything else. So we can also just test that by looking at this. Obviously, if there was penetration, we would see something like that going on. So, as you can see from this, we could go even further with everything, but we really don't need to. We can always... I'm not going to get into materials yet, but what we would do is create a material that has a radial ramp that is driving transparency on this. And then that would allow us to see through, say, these edge loops and that would allow us to see the iris within that. The other option, of course, is just to, alright, let's take a look at the UV texture editor really quickly. Obviously this is not going to work. We want a pretty much perfect planar projection for our eye. And we're going to actually use, I'm not going to get deep into this right now, but because that's for next week, but I'm just going to do this real quick. Let's see. I want to do this on the Z axis, so I'm just going to create UVs, planar projection on Z. So that gives me this nice even thing, and I'm just going to select these outer ones, unfold them so there's no pinching. Let's see there. Shift select the inner ones, so that should be pretty even. Scale it down so it fits just inside here, and then we could just do this as like a 256 texture map, something really low resolution, and we could just make a separate material, make it a little bit easier so we don't have to fit it in with the rest of the body. We could fit it in with the rest of the body pretty easily. Not decided yet how I want you guys to do this. I'm more concerned with just things being built nicely and cleanly and looking good right now. So last thing you'd want to do, let's just call this outer group these together. I am doing L because this is my left eye, right when we're looking at it from this direction. But lastly, I want to center pivot on that, delete all my history, and now let's just make sure that our pivot is set properly. So we don't actually fully want it centered. We're going to want it to center, because we deleted these faces in the back, we're going to want it centered along this middle axis here. So I'm just going to hold D and V, snap it right to that. So now, when I rotate it, it should be in pretty good shape. And let's see how it looks inside of the head. Let's get that in its place. So now, we aren't really into rigging yet, but the main thing is that we want to make sure that the eye is capable of rotating around in the head. So let's just do a quick, okay, looks pretty good. The reason I delete that back half is the eye is never going to go further than this. So we're never really going to see that back side. So that's eyes. You could obviously come in if you really want to go for it, and you can smooth this once. We don't really need to, but we could. So let's just set our rotation back to 0 for now. Hit save, and let's move on to the actual eyelid and this whole area here. So we're already pretty close the way things are after the end of the box model. The main issue at this point, I think, is just that it's a little too big and it's a little too uniform. So the top and bottom of the eye, as you can see, can be very different. On this one, it's pretty rounded on the bottom, and then it kind of flattens on the top of this one. You can see on the eye over here, though, it's a little bit different. You kind of have more of a flat bottom, and it really arches up. This is one thing you almost always get, and you're not seeing a whole lot in this one, but you get this sharp arch that kind of flattens out and softens. So, and then this is almost always kind of flat, if not even kind of coming up a little bit, as you can see over here. This picture is taken from a slightly different perspective too, so that sort of distorts what we're looking at. We're not going to go too crazy with getting all these folds in here, but it would be nice if you can hint at the brow line a little bit. That would definitely give some strength to your model. Even if you're doing a more cartoony anime kind of character, those kind of structural landmarks can be really useful. So before I add anything, I'm going to go in and just kind of, let's see, bring this really close in here. Just going to try to mimic, again, trying to keep these the same on the top and the bottom in case we want to do eye blinks. Just in terms of divisions, I think this needs to come up a little, this can come in. This to be a little bit higher. And obviously just working from the front doesn't give us entirely what we want. So we're going to have to make some adjustments. And I'm also just thinking about the curve of this brow here. The brow line should really be a little bit lower. Should kind of come up to a point here probably. Just turn on the wireframe, get our reference right in there. I'll work with this one for now. This is more or less, let's see, not quite the right scale. Actually, for now, I'm going to turn the eye off just for a second. Try to get this outline right. So you can see we were definitely very big. A little bigger than we needed to be. Again, of course, always just good to work from reference if possible. Even if it's not the perfect reference for your specific model, you know, you should still be trying to look at real anatomy and then kind of exaggerate from there. And just go on one vertex at a time. Let's try to round all this out. Try to draw lines in your head too, just a little bit, you know, like this. It's a clear brow line here. There's a nice curve around here, so I'm trying to kind of keep an eye on that. This is actually going to come out a little bit because we're just going to kind of use this to define where we pull the lid in. So there's really that line right around the eye. And I would say probably down here too. So we can add one more edge loop. I think I'm going to do it here. The nose could probably stand out a little bit more resolution anyway. So I'm just spacing these out just a little bit. Gives me a little more to work with. Then I can define this shape a little bit better. So if you really want, you can kind of come in and extrude these faces out too. Or in, rather. Just gonna kind of leave perspective mode for a second. So this is just a little extra detail that, you know, just kind of go on the extra mile if you have time. Might as well. Front view again. So that's pretty close. Let's try to really use this to get the exterior or the interior contour. Oh, good. And then this one is kind of going to be the rim of the actual lid, which we can sort of see from these specular highlights just a little bit. You can kind of judge from the way the eyelashes are too. So they're going to sprout pretty much from that the tip of that contour. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think I really want to push that much further. Let's look at the side now. So we can see we do have this nice ridge here already kind of forming. So I'm going to remember this is the loop that I wanted to bring in. Oh, hold on. Just look at that from the right side. So right now, that's the opposite of what I want. So I'm actually going to bring that further in. And I think here I'm going to do pretty much the same. It's a much more gradual increase on the bottom lid than the top. Let's go to the front view again. And so this is essentially my eyelid now. And I'm going to add one more. It's going to look excessive, but I'm going to add one more edge loop here. The reason being, when I make my blend shapes, I'm going to want to have that extra geometry because it's going to come out pretty far. Stretch that out quite a bit. Just need to just barely get influence there. So my blend shape might be something like this. I need to make sure that I have this extra edge loop here to hug the contour of the eye and not penetrate it. So when the eye blinks, this needs to kind of come out a little bit. You'll notice in a lot of AAA game titles, looking at ZBrush Central models, sometimes people will actually model it with the eyelid closed. And that's sort of part of the whole relaxed bind pose concept. We're not going to do that. It's just going to undo. But you see now, that's why we want to do... it can sometimes, it's sometimes nicer to have things in the non-stretched out position. And I think with closed eye, that is like the relaxed position of the eye muscles. There's no bunching that way. So the bunching actually happens when the eye is open. So yeah, not really a whole lot more to it than that. So let's turn our eye back on. I think this is pretty good, and this also allows us to bring up a little bit, a little bit here. Blink. When you blink, it's much more the top lid that's doing the action than the bottom, but the bottom will move just a little bit with it. So let's turn off wireframe. I think we can actually, alright, one more thing. So from this perspective, this looks to be, almost perfectly aligned with this, super, super close. But from the right side, it's pretty far. From here, it's pretty far. So I actually want to move this forward quite a bit. And this is, let's also bring this forward a bit. So this edge loop now, or face loop, this actually needs to be the opposite. It's the one part. So this needs to come back quite a bit. Yeah, that's better. This also could come back. Just making a few little minor adjustments. Make sure everything is looking right. Make this a little bit more of a gradual transition. Okay. So now, this face loop, if I can actually select it, is sort of that rim of the eyelid. So like if these were to close, basically these would come in on each other like that. Again, scaling in. So the scaling is not an accurate eye close, but this kind of gives you the idea of what it would do. So as a result, I want to make sure that we have one more extrusion in. Scale it up a little bit too, so there's actually something, so there's some geometry behind here when the eye is in, and this is not super accurate. Like if it was really accurate, it would come up much tighter. You could add that extra edge loop in if you want, kind of just scale it up to sort of round this interior up, but you don't really need that. The eye is going to penetrate with this, and you're never even going to see it. So let's turn the eyes back on. We'll see, we're going to need to move the eye over just a little bit to make this work. We'll go with our body reference and kind of try to get this right in the middle. So let's see. So you see with this character, he really has this downward line here. It's a slight, it kind of comes into a point and makes a triangle. This eye, the whole eye is actually above that line. I'm kind of looking at the line of this point to this point. Everyone's eyes are going to be just a little bit different. But you want to kind of have it sort of centered more or less in here. Maybe I'd say with the emphasis on pushing, if you're going to go a little bit in one direction, go a little bit higher. That seems to be the theme. If you look at a whole bunch of eye pictures. So, lastly, we're going to have to round this out a little bit. And to do that, I definitely want to turn my X-ray off. So you can see this is really not quite right. I think I can pull the eye back a little bit. But let's move the model around the eye rather than the other way around. So I'm going to grab this first, pull it forward. And again, I'm just dragging over like the lid portion. So it's 1, 2, 3, and then the slight inturned 4th vertex. I'm doing one at a time. And this is where we're really trying to find this contour here. And trying to leave the ones in the back alone. smooth our model, we can even get a better idea of how it's going to look. Particularly if we plan to smooth the model. So I remember I could pull this out. You might feel like, oh, I can just pull this out. You might feel that tendency, but like we've already lined it up with our front reference, so let's just trust the way that we laid that out. I'm going to move this up a little bit. Trust the way that we laid that out and just move it forward. So I like to do this a lot where I just work one axis at a time, make sure, you know, get it to where it's like, okay, I know for certain that from this perspective it's correct. And there is a little bit of a bag under here, pretty much on anyone's eyes, no matter how young or youthful your face. Part of being a human is having that line that gets drawn down here, because that's just the way eyes work. Maybe there's a surgery to get rid of that, but then, well, you're just going to look strange, but that's alright. So, it's not bags in the way that you might think of, like, looking old and haggard or tired, just sort of. Rather, that there are some muscles and tissue and stuff that goes underneath this that allow you to be able to blink. So, this is really close right now. You can see if I hit smooth, we pretty much nailed it on the bottom. Top is a little bit off, though. Could try to scale the eye down a little bit, maybe. Just a touch. Let's see. This does seem like it might be a little bit big in there right now. No, I don't think it is. I think the iris is pretty big, though. Actually, the iris is huge. I'm going down to this one. I think that's much more accurate. Let's pull this in. Do one edge loop at a time. So sometimes you don't really notice these things until everything is sort of all together. Then it becomes much more apparent what's working and what isn't. So I'll scale you in, I'll scale it out tiny bit. This one seems to want to come out a little bit more. Yeah, so when we try to make our radial ramp, we'll just kind of try to make this the clear part. So I think that's going to be good. And one way we could kind of test the look of this is, let's see, I'm actually going to get this, scale this in to be the size of the pupil. Bring it out to round that out, and then I'm going to add an edge loop. Oh. Here. And just to get a quick idea, I'm going to create 3 blends. Call one eye white, one eye black, and one eye brown. I'm just going to change these to the color that I defined. So brown is going to be somewhere close to orange, and then just dark. Just doing this real quick as a test. You know, I don't really need this to be perfect. This is not my final material. And then we're just going to make this one more or less white, kind of more towards yellowy orange, and very light. Specular a little. Yeah, I'm actually going to go a little bit lighter than that. And I'm going to start by just coloring the whole thing white. Hit save now, and then I'm going to select this edge loop, and this one, make that brown. And then just this center piece is going to be my pupil. It's going to be black. I want this to be matte black because I don't want it to be reflective at all. Actually, I'm just going to leave them all alone. That gives us an idea, though. Obviously, this is not that realistic right now, but we have a very good idea of how that eye looks in there, and I think that looks pretty good in terms of scale. So that's pretty much it. I don't really want to take it too much farther than that. I could probably pull this in a little bit. This whole edge loop. Let's see. Yeah, we'll scale this in. I think it's a little too much right now. Actually, it might just be this. Yeah, that needs to come in. Because I have so few edge loops, I had to exaggerate a little bit. Sometimes you have to pull these further out than you mean to keep it from penetrating that, but actually it looks like I can pull all these back just a little bit. Go all 4 of these. Pull that back. Go 4 of these. No, and you're always changing perspective to get a better view, clearer view of what you're working with. So let's just adjust this. I know I have that penetration right now. I'll take care of that in a second. But really try to get it to hug this contour, because you definitely don't want to see through the face. And you know, this is a very nice part of the body where you really do get quite a lot of this perfect contour. So actually what I could do, I could probably bring this up a little bit. Up and out. Alright, I think that's about it. So if you want to, you could always go all the way around the body and, you know, add another edge loop in here. If you do that, I would also add one maybe here. Let's see. I'll do these real quick and just kind of see what we get. Make sure I don't have anything in the back selected. So now I'm going to round everything out just a little bit more. Try to evenly space this stuff. This just sort of will allow you to get a slightly better contour. But anytime that you add one on the top of the eyelid, you're going to want to try to add one on the bottom too. Symmetry makes rigging this a little bit easier, so keep an eye out for that. And you definitely don't want, you know, if you have one more on the top than on the bottom, that's okay. Sometimes it can get kind of weird if you decide to put this piece in here. I'm kind of counting this just as one. So basically this little section is equal to this section, so that leaves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And while I'm here, let's move this over. Now when you do this, make sure to check from your side and perspective views again, because this is going to kind of change the contour of your cheek a little bit by moving all this down. But this sort of allows us to get that rim in here, which is nice. And pull this a little bit closer to the corner of the eye. So, you know, always the back and forth. Don't be afraid to do it. Don't skimp on this, you know. Do yourself a favor and put the effort in to really get these shapes right. That's what sets off, you know, it sets apart different variations of level of modeling. So let's see. Let's look at this again. So you might have to come out a little bit further here, just because you have, you know, this eye lens does bulge out just a little bit. And that's a good thing. That's what we want it to look like. But that might mean that I need to bring these verts forward a little bit further. So yeah, I'm going to cap it there, leave it with that. Like I said, everyone's eye is just a tiny bit different, so, you know, this exact contour does not have to be the exact same as your contour. If you're doing a more anime cartoon style, you know, then it might look even different from this still. But try to adhere to these general rules, because, you know, it would be, you know, it's nice to be able to make your character blink. Your character can be much more expressive if there is extra edge loops here to allow for squinting of the eyes or furrowing of the brow or any of that sort of thing. This face here should pretty much support that pretty well right now. So I'm going to bring some of this down. I don't need to do all this because this is actually just for eye example, but I just want to kind of round it all out for a good final look. So yeah, I think that's about it for this video. Hope that was helpful. Hope to see some nice, beautiful eyes over the week on Sunday. Oh, that's way too far out. Let's bring that back. Sorry, I always have to, once I see something that's weird, even if it's a non-finished model, gotta do something about it. Let's see, actually this can all come out a little bit too. That's sort of a weird, there should be a bit of an arch to this. So I'm gonna bring this forward a little bit. I think that'll actually help offset this, this area. You can see with not too many extra edge loops though, I've been able to define a good rim for the eyelid. We have an extra edge loop in the eyelid to allow us to create blend shapes or rigging to make the eye blink. We have a bit more of a brow that's defined here now. You know, this is starting to feel like there's a little bit of a bone under here and a socket that the eye sits in. And yeah, I think just following this video pretty closely should put you in pretty good shape. I'll pull that out just a little bit. And yeah, there we go. So like I said, we have two different kinds of eyes here now. We can just have this one exterior piece, and that is, you know, more than enough. I'm going to make sure my pivot is set on that properly too, which it is. So, you know, I could use this, and this can rotate around in here. I can have them look in different directions. Up, down. When we rig, we'll try to make sure that there's a little bit more space in here for this to move around. Part of rigging the eyes too is you can actually create some deformers and clusters that make it that these little pieces move a little bit with the eye, which is a little bit more realistic. Or, you know, we can do it by the whole group. And then, you know, later on I can go into how we would use materials and use like a radial ramp or potentially just a image map to define transparency on the exterior and then only show the iris on the inside. So yeah, that's about it for now. Good luck with the rest of the weekend, everybody, and I will see you on Monday.